Thank you. Super. Good afternoon. I'm glad to hear all of you. Many of you are, I'm sure, muted at this moment, so I'll kind of get a wave. But thank you very much for sharing your afternoon with me today. And I also have invited, as George said, a panel of participants, all NiceA schools. What you'll see me do is kind of go back and forth between slides. So I will share some information, and that's one of the exciting things about using this. So for instance, I'm going to flip over here so that you can see who's joining us and be able to go back and forth from this. So today, you may have already seen on your screen, but Will Hopkins from Seminary is joining us, Julie Mayring from Ridge Preparatory School, and Elizabeth Stevens from the Hewitt School. And I'm really excited that they are joining us because really the intention of this session is for you to be able to think aloud and hear from schools that are actively doing this, implementing online. And so certainly from the perspective of Hybrid Learning Consortium, I would like to be able to talk about and share our perspective, why we are doing what we're doing, but I think your best insight and resource is your colleagues, those who are on that progressive edge, who are maintaining and honoring the tradition of who they are as a school while delving into this new realm of thinking and talking about online learning. So many of us may have crossed paths at regional meetings or other organizations, so I don't want to be too redundant about HLC, but I do want to give you at least a little bit of framework before we drop into some question and answer, so that, again, you kind of have a sense of who we are as an organization. We are, well, kind of take us through who we are as a NiceA's partnership. So these are our first cohort of NiceA schools, and then as a larger organization as well. We're based at the Barstow School in Kansas City, Missouri. You kind of see right here in the middle. Also an independent school. And I started this in Kansas City in a school that's very similar as far as to your schools. We're like-minded independent schools, and I always say that because as a collective, we're separately talking about ourselves as a consortium, but I think often people probably forget that I'm literally in a school right now and having very similar experiences. So we come from that shared both enthusiasm and empathy for the positive things that can happen and the challenges in going through this. As we talk about it, the thing that I really want to make sure that we're hearing and knowing as a consistent theme, and part of why I imagine you'll hear schools talk about this collective, is that our focus is on the blend of synchronous and asynchronous. As a collective, we really want to grow and enhance the idea of community online. We are looking to resonate with the independent school values of teacher-student connection and sense of peer-to-peer connection. And we started this because we had a really disconcerting sense that what was happening in online learning was a very disconnected experience. And we felt like our schools weren't able to be actively participatory and building and learning instructional design, but that we also, as schools, would not be, if we partnered with other organizations, it would not resonate with or adapt to who we were as a school ourselves, but any schools that partnered. So that's kind of an overview. These are quick terms, not to assume that you don't know, but at the same time, sometimes I get questions about when you say synchronous, what are you talking about? It's like this, where we're all live together on Zoom. We use Zoom in our classes, and asynchronous, where we're building teacher immediacy and sense of interaction through various threads, voice threads, videos, and whatnot, but that students are learning at their own times. So that is kind of a context for where we're starting. What I'll do is go through each question and we'll have a chance to talk about that. I really welcome you to interject and participate in the discussion, but about halfway through our time, if we've been able to work through our questions, we'll also open to just general conversation so that you'll be able to direct the conversations towards questions that might be specifically applicable to you. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and, oops, did I freeze us here? Are you there?
Nope, we're still here.
Okay, thank you. It sort of froze for a minute. So I'm going to go back to my sharing the screen and just go right into the first question. So I keep going back and forth. There we go. So the first question I thought would help us introduce who we are as schools and the schools that have joined us, and essentially the conversation about online learning as a larger conversation. Why were you looking to partner? Why were you looking to have online learning? But then in so doing, what led you to HLC NiceA's? So again, I'll stop the sharing so that we'll be able to have our Brady Bunch sense of conversation and discussion. So in doing that, if you'll tell a little bit, I know you guys often cross paths too, but if you'll introduce yourself, you know, from Friends Seminary and a little bit about Friends Seminary and your role there, and then be able to talk about online learning and Elizabeth at Hewitt and Julie at Bay Ridge.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Is my audio okay?
It's perfect.
Great. So I'm the academic dean here at Friends Seminary, and I oversee a lot of different initiatives. And since I've been here, online learning and how to bring that to our students has been one of our conversations. And if you're like us for a lot of years, it's just sort of spinning your wheels trying to think about what's the right model for getting it out of the gate. And you know, we looked at MOOCs, massive online courses. We looked at other consortiums. We even dabbled with the idea of trying to form our own consortium of schools to do online courses and share them. Our motivation for wanting to bring online learning to our students was twofold. One, we're kind of a tiny school. We're relatively big, but we're still a tiny school. And you know, we have a very intimate community, which is great, and a lot of families choose our school for that reason. But we're not able to have the broad choice of elective offerings because we're such a small school. So online learning was an obvious solution that existed to bring the elective opportunities of a larger school while still maintaining the intimacy of our small school. The second impetus we had was that it seems to us that more and more our students are going to need to have the skills and discipline and habits of collaborating and working and learning in an online digital environment. And so we wanted to make sure that we exposed our students to the opportunity to try that out while they were here in our high school, so that when they got to college, they had an experience with online learning. So we were shopping around and trying to figure out what we were going to do. And then when we encountered Hybrid Learning Consortium at the NiceA's regional meeting from 2 years ago, it just seemed like a really great fit. One of the attractive things about HLC is their commitment to supporting each school's culture and ethos and learning philosophy in how the HLC program connects with their program. And so the flexibility and just the recognition that each school is its own learning culture was very appealing to us in terms of thinking about how it was going to fit. So I'll stop there as sort of an answer to that first question.
Super. Thank you. Elizabeth? You want to jump in?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, thank
Hi.
you.
So, hi, I'm Elizabeth Stevens. I'm head of the upper school at Hewitt, and actually, what was just said is what I was going to say. So, I would just echo all of the above. I mean, we are also a small school that was looking for an opportunity to provide courses to a handful, sometimes, or even one student. Sometimes that we don't necessarily have the staffing or desire because it's so few students to provide, but wanted to do so in a way that would still maintain some level of integrity and control over that programming. So that was certainly one need that looking at online learning was the reason for our research. I would say the other is the belief that experiences like the one we're all having right now are a very real part of our students' lives and future, and that being prepared to learn in different media and in different ways with people not necessarily in the same place as they are is an important skill. It's a highly important collaborative skill, so we were looking for that as well. So I'm just putting in different words what's been said, but the same two desires drove our looking to online programs, and I would agree that HLC presented to us a sense of really a genuine partnership of providing online, but more specifically blended learning that would be aware of and responsive to the needs of our own community that was interested in partnering with us as a school and deriving a program that would really meet the needs of our program, the realities of our student population, and an organization with which we could partner around, what they have to offer, but also what our needs are and what we have to offer. And so that just seemed like a really great relationship that we could foster with HLC. So we also were looking around, and just there were a lot of things that worked and synced in terms of our needs.
Super, thank you. Julie?
I think I got can everyone hear me?
Perfect.
What I could add to that is I think NiceA's made the experience an easy one by coming and kind of giving a thumbs up to this group of people. And it really is a partnership. It's a group of people who are working with you and trying to have this experience be the fullest one it can be for your own school. So for our purposes, we're a lower, middle, and high school. The middle school, I decided to kind of jump into this and be the first one to try it. We have 200 students in our school, and we were looking, as other schools have, to expand our offerings in digital arts, but also in our world languages department. So we have a group right now of 6 students who are taking American Sign Language, and that's been a really great experience for them.
Super. Great, thank you. So the next question that we are going to cover, and I'll go back and forth a little bit, but so in what ways has partnering with HLC impacted your programming in campus? And in some ways that you just sort of chatted a little bit about that, but I think one of the things that we certainly hear is the concern that maybe it would make significant waves. Sometimes the hopes that it will make a big impact. Schools kind of go back and forth with, how did this really make some kind of support, or was it not as challenging because we all have communities that have people who are really excited about online learning, but also really concerned and fearful of what that means for us as faculty, us as our student learning, our parents. So that whole spectrum exists in all of our schools. So as kind of a conversation piece for each of you, I know you've had probably slightly different experiences. What would be your reflection on that a little bit, as well as potential guidance for schools? I really do hope that we can share what we've done and been through and why we're doing it, so that schools can consider that as they're thinking online learning in one way or another. We could go same order.
I don't want to speak first every time. I would.
Okay.
Julie or Elizabeth.
Sure, I'll jump in. So I think when we were looking to online programming as a way to expand program, our initial needs and then ended up being a little different from the way we implemented the program. So I'll speak to that. I know challenges, I think, are one of our questions that we'll come to. It'll probably get folded into my answer. So we're using HLC in a couple of different ways. One is we have 3 students didn't up with either the languages that we offer or the level that we could offer for them at their grade level. So it was either a question of a student having taken Italian. We don't have Italian. She couldn't at the 10th grade level actually jump into any of the courses we had because we didn't have an intro level for her. And so we partnered with HLC around her being able to take a Mandarin course. We offer Mandarin. So it's sort of a 2-in-1 because we don't offer Mandarin but are interested in considering that for the future, so we could pilot that language and we could make sure a student had a course that would meet her interest and ensure that she would have 3 years of language study for the remainder of her high school years at Hewitt. So that's one way. Something similar happened with our Spanish program where we had 2 students coming in, and we all know what it's like trying to schedule different levels of grades and languages, particularly in a small school. We just couldn't make it work to sync them with the language section they should be in. So we used HLC in a wonderful way to get them into the right section so that they could continue their language study effectively. And so the impact on campus there is only additive because we were really going to be challenged about staffing these students with a full credit course and drawing on staff who were already sort of stretched. And in this solution, we were able to tap 2 staff members just a few, a period a week for them to work as support on campus with these students and put the bulk of that experience on the HLC shoulders, and it's working out really beautifully. So that's, as I say, the impact has been extraordinarily positive, and I think faculty see this as a great resource to supplement the work they're doing, and that gives them the time and resources to work with full classes and yet know that students are still going to be prepared through their language experience in HLC, or if they ever jump back into a section here, it's going to all match up. So that's been very positive. I think another direction that we've gone that's been challenging was actually where we had an existing need around a core program in our junior-senior physics elective, and we're in a staffing situation where we looked to HLC to resolve that. I think that would be a place where the impact on campus has been somewhat different. And in part, I think it's interesting to hear from one school's experience at the middle school level. I think one of the things that we learned to consider was the weight of a new experience, particularly at the fall senior level, I would say, is something that we learned because the impact on seniors who are, of course, very concerned around college and transcripts and fall grades, any sort of novelty can be probably more unsettling to that age group than any other. And so I think that was something that we felt as an impact on campus in ways perhaps that we hadn't anticipated. And even the difference between juniors and seniors experiencing that kind of programming is notable. So that's something where, we would consider that, and I would just welcome, conversation with any schools considering where to implement programming is sort of at what level and in what way. We do also, we're signed up for an intro to engineering course in the spring, and we will have some older students in that, but given the nature, again, that that's a very elective program, it's an additive program, it's not either, supplementing, replacing anything that we otherwise would offer in person in any way. I expect that experience is also going to be very positive. So I hope that's, we may come back to, I can speak more about some of what I've just said, but that's sort of an overview.
Thank you.
Yeah, if that's okay. At the middle school level, we're starting small. So we offered, I put out an email contact to all the parents, kind of offering different language selections. And the one that was popular for the 6 students who are taking it is American Sign Language. So that's the one we're starting with. And I feel it's been very successful for that group. It's something that I think the students had to kind of up their knowledge of technology in order to do it. So there was a little bit of a learning curve for these students, logging on, making videos, sharing them. But like I spoke to them this week, and they feel very positively about the experience. They feel it's been a challenge for them. I don't feel that it's taken away from our environment in any way. It's just been additive. I think it did put our faculty at ease when we introduced the program to make it clear that we were not going to offer redundant courses. So we weren't in any way impacting the offerings that we currently had. We just felt we were offering things that we couldn't currently offer with our faculty. I think that's all I have to add.
You know, from our perspective, we had a lot of agreement amongst our faculty that the concept of online learning was great, but when it came to thinking about courses, everyone had a lot of anxiety about any potential courses within their subject area or courses that would potentially compete with their electives or courses. And so we had to be very limited and constrained. And so we chose from the extensive course catalog, we chose 4 courses from the HLC catalog that would not align with any of our academic departments. So we offered AP Psychology, Entrepreneurship, Engineering, and AP Computer Science. And so those were the only 4 courses that our students could sign up with. And none of them were courses that we offered on campus. And so we've got about 23 students signed up for those courses this year. And so far they're reporting really positive experiences. And in terms of enrollment in other electives and other courses, we haven't seen any impact. A lot of students are taking the course as a 6th academic course. Some students are taking it as an elective and you know, in place of an on-campus elective, but in some cases that provides a little bit of relief on some of the overcrowded electives on campus. So far the experience has been really positive for students and faculty.
So that's a helpful segue into, and rather than switch back and forth, I'll just kind of drop into the conversational piece about the next 2 questions. The next one is essentially policies and procedures. And one of the things that we work to do is understand each school's individual needs for implementation that were just described, but also kind of the culture and how we can best support the programming. And so, for instance, you just heard about the approach to not offer classes that are already offered on campus. That's very common and almost across the board. There are very few partner schools, I would say. For instance, Interlochen, as an arts academy, they open up the whole catalog because they're looking for significant flexibility for students in their scheduling so that they can have larger amounts of time for their art and performance courses. So there are schools, because of, again, their culture and their mission, that might approach it differently. Are there other suggested or policies or procedures that you felt like, maybe it was communication procedures, maybe it's policies, parameters around age of students, schools, again, we really try to understand each and give them examples of peer institutions and why they're doing what they're doing. But this is an opportunity to conversationally talk about some of what you decided to do.
What I'd like to add here is, since I'm dealing with middle school students, I felt that I wanted to kind of vet students who I felt could handle the independence required to stay on top of the coursework. It's a serious academic course. And I felt that the technological needs were kind of secondary. I could help them through that, but they needed to be willing to commit. So it wasn't that anybody could sign up. If they wanted to sign up, they needed to see me first. And I checked with their advisor to kind of get a teacher recommendation before I just signed them up. The other thing that we did was we had our parents pay half of the rate for the course, because we also wanted, first we wanted parent permission, so we wanted the parents to be aware this would be a commitment that their child was making, and we felt that was a good way, at least initially, to get buy-in at home.
We did three important things on our campus. One was the HLC courses are only open to 11th and 12th graders. We really wanted the whole initiative to be successful. And while as a school we're learning how to support our students in taking online courses, we wanted to make sure that we were learning to do that with students that had some significant academic experience already. So only 11th and 12th graders. We also required the head of upper school to approve any student taking an online course. And that was so that students that had struggled with independent work or just academic discipline and habits, we sort of kept them out of a situation that they might not be ready for. And then the third thing that we did that I think is important is have students sign up for their online courses in the same process with which they request and sign up for all of their other courses, rather than them signing up for their on-campus courses and then later in the spring or in the fall right before the school year adding on the online courses. And what that did is help kids realize that the online course is as much a part of their academic program and workload and time management planning as any other course, and that when they're thinking about what courses to match up and pair together, that they're thinking about their online course at that moment.
We did the same in terms of course sign up to make sure that this was part of our overall course and program catalog, so that this HLC experience was not viewed as a separate set of courses, but was really part of our own course offerings. Something else that we did that I don't know, we did it for a reason and it's worked. I don't know that I'd recommend it, but I mention it just as a practice that's been done, is actually a sort of grade share. And again, this is speaking to the experience of older students, seniors in particular, who were unsure, around their ability to sort of build a relationship with an online teacher and feel that their work and effort and personalities would be well known. And so as a way to sort of not to take complete control of that back, because that's not the online experience, but going to the notion of hybrid and blended, was to arrange for the grades to be parceled between the online teacher and the on-campus liaison, so that there would be some sort of hands-on ability to monitor and supervise the work of students in the classroom, so that sort of concept of their effort and engagement and independence, so actually being able to assess those qualities as much as their assessment on maybe more fact-based kind of work. And so we did design a sort of way to parcel the grade between HLC and Hewitt, so that students felt their work on campus and online would be measured in equal part.
Super. So I think that's also a really helpful segue into sharing, kind of coming back down from the bigger conversation of implementation and procedure to student experience. And one of the things that we also do as far as working with schools is developmentally looking at age groups, middle versus upper school, how those courses are designed differently, the amount of time that's necessary, content area to content area for synchronous versus asynchronous. Core classes, languages have increased synchronous time. And then having that conversation with each campus in how they schedule that. Most of the classes at an upper school level are looking at using students' time in a way that they're scheduling, knowing this is a full, rigorous, content-heavy class, and to schedule in that way in how many classes they take on. But it's not necessarily scheduled into their day. Whereas with a core class, if that was a class that was already going to have an allocation of time, like the Mandarin, for instance, or physics class, that although it doesn't have to be, set in the same often challenging for a scheduling situation, that the students would have an allocation of time to be able to give that on campus. And so that enters the conversation of middle school proctors for students, if they're in the same room, the balance of if they are or they aren't. And all three of you as schools have approached this in different ways, given the different kinds of classes you're offering and the different ages of students. So I think you could talk about anything from, the connection and relationship with the teacher, the access you feel like you have to the teacher or the students do, even connection to us as HLC as a team, the liaison conversation around the course experience, how you manage the time and space on campus if you need to or if you don't. So some of those conversations might be helpful to understand student experience.
I'll say that the experience for our students has been great so far. We've got, just today I got an email from a student who's really enjoying AP Psychology to the extent that they want to add another online course in the spring. And so I think that was great news. The scheduling of the sessions was a little bit foreign to our students at first, sort of having to work with the instructor to schedule a time and to really think outside the box about when they could do it. And, in some cases it's during a lunch period. And a really common thing is evenings, sort of 8:30 p.m. Eastern time. And I joined one of those classes, and it was really cool to see some of our students in this same Brady Bunch discussion style with a student from Kansas and another student from Hawaii. So it was dark in the background of our students' screens, but the sun was still shining in Hawaii. So it was kind of cool to be able to see in real time our students connecting across the country with kids in all different kinds of settings. The HLC staff has been great. We had one student who got a pretty serious concussion and had to withdraw from the online course because they were not allowed to do any additional screen time. And the HLC instructor, as well as the learning coordinator from HLC, made the time to join our campus sort of guidance meetings around that student and what they needed. And so it was almost like having them as part of our faculty and our response team about supporting that student's medical needs. I'll say at this point that the role of liaison is really important for us. I think we've found a really good person who is who's a good communicator and who's really responsive to being that point person between either the HLC office or the individual teacher, wherever they may be, and our students on campus. So if a student hasn't submitted some work for a couple days, our liaison is right on top of it in terms of checking in with that student about what their catch-up plan was. We had a big need at the outset of the semester for our liaison to support a lot of our students because the HLC semester began a week ahead of our school year because the start of our school year was delayed by a construction project. And so most of our students that had registered for courses were fine. They were in email communication and they were able to get up and running with their online courses the week before school started. But then we had a small handful of students that during the add drop period may have dropped an on-campus course and wanted to add an online course, and they were in the situation of joining the online course in some cases 2.5 weeks into the course. And so really working closely with those students to make sure that they had a very focused and precise plan to get caught up was an important thing for our liaison to do in conjunction with the HLC office and teachers. And it really worked well. And I think our at this point, our students are all having really great experiences.
Super, thanks.
As a middle school, Am I working? Okay, it looked like I froze for a minute. As a middle school, I wanted to more highly structure the experience for the students. That was recommended by the HLC team. So I have the students during what's normally a class time. They are meeting in a class with the teacher. And they are going onto their laptops to do the asynchronous time. And then once a week, we've set up during school where we connect with the teacher. And so we're doing that all together in a classroom as well. And so the students, of course, are working on coursework outside of class time, but there's a lot of in-school structured time for them. And I just thought that that made the most sense for middle school students to give them the greatest chance of success with this material. One challenge that we ran into is our school has Chromebooks for students, and Chrome does not, or the Chromebook does not support a meeting like this on Zoom. So when we have the students all together speaking with the teacher, we do it on a single desktop because it's a group of 6 right now. We can do that, but we obviously have to work to get a bank of laptops that can make this easier for the students. I'll echo what Will said about the HLC staff is wonderfully supportive, very collaborative, easy to get a hold of. I've done Zoom meetings with them when we were first getting set up and I needed some guidance, very accommodating. We also had a student situation that needed to be accommodated. We had a student who lost their parent quite suddenly. And so we were able to withdraw a student from the course, you know, which is not something they would standardly do kind of midstream, but the student just couldn't continue to take the course given her changed life circumstance. So I felt they were very compassionate and supportive through that as well. The teacher that we're dealing with, Dr. Malcolm, is a wonderful professor, great sense of humor. The students have a fun time with him, learning sign language. In terms of his communication with me, he sends me a weekly progress note. I'm the liaison for the students, so he sends me a weekly progress note. It enables me to know where the students are performing weekly, and I can communicate with them and set up a plan if they need to make up work or if they're, you know, on track. That's wonderful. They get that feedback. If they need to schedule extra time, they can do that as well. Yeah.
Super. So Elizabeth, if you have anything to add, and then I can see, you know, where we are in time. I want to make sure we also have time to be able to open up to questions. So, but I don't want to leave you out of that part.
No, that's fine. I mean, again, I'm repeating what's already been said, but I can't say enough for the HLC's whole staff being extraordinarily flexible, available. Sarah did come to our curriculum night and joined us in New York on campus. The teacher is always available to both to us as teachers and administrators who might have questions, but is always also available to students. You know, and as I've told the students, I don't know any on-campus teacher who's really available 24 hours a day, but it seems like their HLC teacher is, so they're very much you know, able to take questions or work with students in small groups or individually. So that's been extraordinary. I think a place we've run into challenge, it's interesting to hear the middle school experience, much like ours with our physics course, where we had a very high enrollment that was somewhat unexpected and ended up scheduling those classes on campus so that students would be in the same place at the same time. And I think in many ways that made it easier to find the scheduling time during the normal school day. I think where that can actually, where we found sometimes can be challenging is potentially the confusion of the physical proximity of students in a classroom setting and the online experience such as we're having now, and sort of where one's attention is drawn in terms of classmates as opposed to screen and teacher or other people that are in that environment. So I think that's somewhat of an anomalous situation for us because we are, as a school, actually providing sort of the entirety of a section rather than sharing that course experience perhaps with other schools. And we haven't seen that at all in the language courses where students are genuinely online and in an online experience with students in other schools in other locations, and where I think that's sort of been a pure experience than it has been where we have all the students, you know, in a room here that, as I say, can sometimes work and then sometimes can provide, I think, some distraction rather than focus on the HLC program at a given time. But again, I think that may be a result of the high turnout in the way we schedule that. The other thing is I just would say that it's important, I think, to get ahead of school calendars. You mentioned sort of starting a week or two before holidays, if we have no homework nights, just being really clear around communicating that, because again, everyone at HLC is extraordinarily flexible, but it's really important that we always remember to communicate out what we're doing here so that it seems consistent with what HLC is doing.
Super. That's very helpful. So at this time, to be able to have the opportunity to have questions, are there specific questions that I can answer about online in general, HLC, or again, you're always welcome to connect with me on Zoom. So being able to use the resources of Will, Elizabeth, and Julie, I do encourage that too. Any questions? Yeah, so I can see Pam. Okay, great.
I'm a little bit confused. How much time are the kids in this Brady Bunch all on at the same time, and how much are they working on their own in their own chosen time?
Great. So I'll kind of jump in on that just because I can speak to how different it is per course, both per course, per teacher, per content area. So what we do is set a fundamental baseline. We have expectations. We're supporting our teachers in the same way that we are supporting campuses. So our teachers are meeting weekly, developing, but also through the teaching of the class. Like you could hear stories about meeting with students, but also with campus meetings. So we're always connected with what the teacher is experiencing and doing through the teaching. So we will ask as a fundamental baseline that there would be 2 meetings per week. And that might be, one whole group of 45 minutes, and it might be then smaller 15-minute check-ins. With languages, it might need to be more individual, so you can really have conversation with the students one-on-one for in-depth immersion. But it might be like a class globalization or AP psychology that really fundamentally thrive on the discussion-based nature of that class. And so the whole group is trying to be orchestrated, or groups of 4 or 5. We never have more than 17 students in a section, and rarely do all of those schedules overlap. And so unless they are scheduled in a way, like Elizabeth talked about, having a group on campus, instead it would be more like Will talks about, where 4 or 5 come together because that's the time that they can in an evening, weekend, or free period on campus, or even a lunch period. So those are the time chunks, and that's the balance. So we say that expect students should be guided to plan for the same amount of time, if you will, to allocate to an on-campus class, but in very different ways. It's not 45 minutes every day scheduled onto their rotation of, however you might be doing your scheduling. We've kind of seen everything from the block to whatnot. But instead that they should understand that level of weekly focus and commitment for both the asynchronous and synchronous. There is a whole layer of reading, writing, and then also the live engagement and communication. But often students, again, will be in evenings or weekends, and it might be, Tuesday evening and a Saturday afternoon. Is that helpful? Great. Another question. Super. I think you're muted. Are you speaking?
Yeah, Akbar.
I'm just turning it up.
Great, thank you.
So, how is there a standardized accreditation process? When we looked around, we saw your group a year ago. We saw other groups. Then there are the standalones at many of the colleges.
Sure.
It seems to be a wild west of what to expect within any one course.
Interesting.
So how is that thought about in terms of our face-to-face accreditation?
Mm-hmm. And that's a helpful question. For us, I would agree as far as seeing other experiences being quite diverse. What we've tried to do is pull together what we consider a house style. And so when I reference the kind of guidance and support, that's some on tools, but a lot of that is on instructional design. So if I were to screen share and show you classes, you would see very familiar styles in design, presentation, and work through of expectation of the way that weeks are structured. Students have accountability throughout the week. It's not, kind of a 8 units, turn it in at midnight on Sunday kind of thing. They have very carefully, we've used best practices to understand how the design of a class creates the engagement of the student. And so we work with teachers on how that functions. We will say that is an important and organic piece. We want to share what teachers are growing and doing with each other. So we create that cohort too, as a professional development piece. But we feel like HLC has a strong consistency as far as approach. What I will say though is it's like any classroom on your campus, you will still have the diversity of teachers and passion and teaching style, because they are teachers from each of our independent school partner campuses. And so they're equally, it's not to say different in quality of teaching, but you might have a really charismatic online teacher that is creating, high production videos, and then a teacher who spends time building some of those individual relationships in the synchronous side. And the videos are a little bit more of this kind of grassroots, in the office check-in kind of video. And we try to have, again, house-style framing video, teaching video, check-in videos. So we work with teachers on all of those levels. But I think it's fair to say the heart of who we are it's still our teachers. And so the diversity of who our teachers are is an important piece of that. But to the, okay, yeah, jump in. George.
I was just going to jump in from the accreditation.
Okay, great. I was going to shift to that.
Respects, this is, I think, if not the Wild West, it's certainly the new frontier for accreditation bodies. There are standalone programs that only deliver online courses that are now becoming accredited by different associations, different accrediting bodies. And in some cases, there are similar standards for accreditation. And in other cases, there are unique standards or criteria that are developed that specifically deal with the unique aspects of the instructional context in an online class. Each of the members of this consortium is an accredited school through one of the regional or state accrediting bodies like NiceA's. So all of the NiceA's members are accredited through NiceA's, and NiceA's is part of a national group of accrediting bodies under the umbrella of NAIS. And all of us agree to certain principles and concepts so that the accreditation process in California is quite similar to the one in New York and in the Midwest. And so all of the members are a part of that. And what we have done at NiceA's is to weave the accreditation of online and hybrid programs in our individual schools into the program evaluation. So that's another way to approach it. Sort of not, we don't accredit HLC, we accredit the schools that are a part of HLC, and we accredit those hybrid and online components of their programs as part of their educational program.
Okay.
So as a layer of that, we try to be very transparent. You can shadow classes prior to choosing to offer them. You shadow, the liaison is always in the class as a shadow to know what is happening with the class. And then again, to do some of the things that you've heard with Will and Elizabeth and Julie in the way that we individualize the course experience to the campus. And then that way, the school really can say they have a connection and ownership and engagement with the course experience, so that when that accreditation process is happening, you can represent your partnership with HLC. But HLC does not stand alone as an organization. Again, we are a peer independent school, and so we're accredited and our partner schools are all accredited, and that's how the umbrella of separate accreditations work together.
Okay.
Thank you. Another question? We have a few more minutes. Super, thank you. Yes.
Director.
John.
John Stegman from Manly's Pebble Hill in Syracuse. Could you talk a little bit about the staffing models that you have seen in different schools, Sarah? I don't know. I assume, you know, it varies quite a bit if you're just offering one sign language course versus a, you know, like what you described at the art school in Michigan. What do you recommend as far as getting started, and how do you recommend schools evaluate or plan for a staffing model?
So I'll talk about the way that we have grown our courses and our staffing. If I think I'm understanding, you know, are you kind of talking about the way that faculty are giving and sharing their time within already a full course load? Is that where you're?
I meant more that the liaison role at the school. It sounded like in some situations the liaison sits in on those classes, and in other situations perhaps not. I'm also wondering about, like, are they responsible for proctoring tests? Do they handle reporting? What are the duties of liaisons that you see?
Great. So what I'll do is follow up with, or maybe put it into the PDF of information that George can send out so that you have some bullet points of that. But a liaison is someone who does do all of those layers. There are main conduit of conversation and information. So we will, a liaison will help us share the classes and help build them into that enrollment process. A liaison will help coordinate the faculty departmental meetings for vetting classes and choosing classes. A liaison will take all of the grade reports and comments that we send and then either carry that forward to the registrar who would put that into your reporting, or do it themselves depending on your organizational structure. A liaison is the person that we will come to first to say, you know, a student's having a challenge, or you should really congratulate a student on this effort, or whatever it is each week as we're trying to give that feedback. A school is welcome to say, you know, we have this advisor structure and we'd like to create more of a web. But what we find is if we can keep that communication through a very specific conduit, then the liaison is that's why Will's talking about being proactive with communication and engaged in your community. That person is really our lifeline in so many ways to developing those relationships and creating that consistency. The liaison will also could be the proctor person, but that is different in different schools. For instance, Maumee Valley, the only class where they have proctored tests is for their multivariable class. And so the multivariable calculus class goes to a learning center. The teacher sends the test. It's proctored there. Then the director of the learning center sends that back directly to the teacher. It could be through the liaison. Other schools, again, it depends on whether the school wants to have a proctored environment or not. If the school's building time onto campus, whether they choose for the liaison to be the proctor there, or if they're looking at other open opportunities of faculty. For instance, here at Barstow in the middle school, we do have faculty who are allocated as proctors to student times that are scheduled on campus. They're not always all the same class because they might be taking several classes, but it's an elective time. And that was developmentally appropriate for the middle school. But in the upper school, if they are working on classes, they are going to be in the Cove, a collective working space that they would also be doing other work or research. They're using their free time without needing to have a scheduled proctor. Part of what Elizabeth described was this blend of having access to a lab environment and more scheduled live time with the physics teacher because of the complexity of the content and the rigor of that coursework. And so, again, having a larger group of students in one environment, it increases the value to have the proctor there. So the liaison role can be, smaller or greater on the campus, but I'll send you some bullet points.
Okay.
Great. George, it looks like we're getting close to the end. I do want to be mindful of time. What I would say at this point, because I want to be I want to let you wrap up, George. But first, thank you very much, Will, Elizabeth, and Julie for joining us. Really appreciate your insight. So thank you all. Kind of the muted thank you. And then also please follow up. If you have questions that we did not have time to address, on behalf of Will, Elizabeth, and Julie, I am sure that they would be happy to receive queries and have conversations with you, but certainly I would. One of the best ways that we feel like we can individualize the experience for you to know you and your school is to do this kind of Zoom meeting. And I can screen share classes. I can talk about student experience. I can show you and let you shadow for 2 weeks to have a better sense of a diversity of classes, those kinds of things. So feel free to reach out to me and we can answer your individual questions.